Hey everyone, my name is Bethany Bugema. I am a physical education major, so for the research project, I created a geography lesson plan. I have had experience creating health and physical education lesson plans, but this one was a little different. The lesson plan itself is different than the file and template that we use in my classes, and obviously the content is not something that I had a lot of practice with, so it was a learning curve, but it was a really nice challenge that I enjoyed doing. So, to create the lesson plan part of it, you needed to fill out the lesson plan document, create three 15-minute lectures, and then two assessments that aligned with your lesson plan. When it came to the lectures, there were three topics given to us. So the first of these was tourism overview. During this lecture, I talked to my students about what tourism is, different motivators that people have for being a tourist, different landscape classifications, and tourist attraction classifications. The second lecture was on social impacts. So this was positive and negatives that tourism has socially. And then finally, it was a lecture on the environmental impacts. Once again, it was positives and negatives that tourism has on the environment, and there were also slides on how the environment impacts tourism. For my lesson plan, I designed it as a lesson that came after these three lectures and was a lead up to the end of unit project. As you can see in this picture, the course that this was a part of was Human Geography at the sophomore level. The unit title is Population and Migration, and students needed the knowledge from those three lectures in order to continue on to this lesson. The standards that were given to us was Geography Standard 2, Impact of Movement. So this analyzes the social impact of movement of people to different locations in a variety of time periods and locations throughout the world. And the second standard that we needed to touch on was analyze the intentional and unintentional spatial consequences of human actions on the environment at the local, state, tribal, regional, country, and world levels. Because of that, these following lesson targets were created for my students. They needed to be able to explain the difference between migration and tourism, to outline 5 ways that tourism affects the environment at the local, state, tribal, regional, country, or world levels, to understand a number of reasons for individuals to migrate from one country to another, and to understand the end of unit project that is based off of this information. These various lesson targets were demonstrated through completion of worksheets and class discussions. So the lesson itself began with students starting with the set induction of a writing prompt of places that they would like to travel to. The first activity then touched on migration as they took out their Chromebooks and went to websites that talked about personal migrant stories, and a worksheet was completed for them to fill out based on these stories. The second activity switched over to tourism, and once again, they found stories from these websites of real tourist destinations, and they needed to complete a worksheet. There was then a class discussion with essential questions that were outlined in this lesson plan. And at the conclusion, they were given information about their project for the end of unit and had the opportunity to ask questions. When it came to assessments, these were screenshots of the 2 worksheets that they needed to fill out. The left one was for the migrant websites, and then the second one was for the tourist websites. And then finally, a screenshot of some of the project guidelines. They were able to decide whether they were going to advertise for a tourist destination, warn others about the effects of tourism, or create a migration story. Lower down in this document, there are more guidelines on what students needed to include in their projects so that they had that information. And that concludes my research for Geography 365.